Like every part of the world, Africa has had its share of conflict, which is usually characterized by the outbreak of war, which in turn leads to the loss of lives and properties. The ongoing conflicts in Africa seem to be ravaging every part of the continent. These conflicts are terrorism, agitation for control of resources, militancy, and all-out war in some regions. In the past few years, inter-communal clashes, which are rooted in the competition for scarce resources, have been seen as one of the driving forces of some of these conflicts. Forcible displacement, sexual violence, massacre, and attack on schools and hospitals are all atrocities in these conflicts. Conflict generally affects economic development and productivity by the destruction of infrastructure and interfering with economic activities. Conflict also has a long-term effect, whose impact is felt long after the conflict is over. In today's video, we will look at 5 ongoing conflicts in Africa and their economic effects. Let's start with the 5th conflict. 5. Terror in Mozambique. Islamist terrorists have been responsible for attacks in Cabo Delgado since 2017, and lethal weapons like explosives and firearms are used to conduct these attacks. There was a large-scale attack in Palma in 2021 that claimed the lives of innocent civilians, an atrocity said to have been carried out by the Islamic terrorist. The United Nations estimates that about 1 million Mozambicans have fled their homes because of this conflict in the country. Most of these militants are motivated by the perceived mineral deposit in the region. A recent study conducted by Security Studies and the Judicial Training Institute of Mozambique has shown that citizens blame bad governance of resources like natural gas and rubies as the reason for the escalation of the crisis in Cabo Delgado, which has led to the death of over 4,000 people, and 80,000 people are displaced due to the violence in that province. The combined force, which includes member states like Botswana and Angola, members of Europe, Rwanda, South Africa, and the United States of America, have sent military personnel and equipment to help in the fight. Although this force has been able to take back control of some areas in Cabo Delgado, it will most likely take longer to put an end to the insurgency. This is because they can hide in rural areas where they threaten civilians and attack government forces along the coast. The United Nations said Mozambique is facing a humanitarian catastrophe beyond epic proportions. Crisis Group has advocated for dialogue with the ranks and files on measures to address the root cause of frustration that leads these militants to pick up arms. The Mozambique war has caused macroeconomic and microeconomic distortions. However, the economy is expected to see a growth of about 5.7% in the medium term between 2022 to 2024. Take a break and subscribe to the new tourist channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on any of our educational videos. Also, share this with your friends and family. Let's continue. 4. The Democratic Republic of Congo's armed conflict. In recent times, the intensified conflict between the Congolese army and the armed group M23 in Rutshuru territory in the North Kivu province of the eastern DRC has led to the displacement of about 23,000 people since October of 2022. In North Kivu, about 1.6 million people have been displaced from their homes and now must shelter in internally displaced people camps. The eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo is home to several displaced populations. The refugee reacts to a lack of government intervention in the areas by building militias. Armed groups like the M23 and the Allied Democratic Forces have been recruiting these refugees with the promise of economic gain and ideological favors. Corruption among top generals in the Congolese army is one of the factors undermining the efforts put to end the ongoing conflict. The Democratic Republic of Congo's army is underpaid, which means there is little interest in fighting this conflict. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the 3rd largest producer of diamonds, accounting for about 23% of the world's supply. They also account for about 70% of the cobalt supply, which is an essential element for the green technology revolution. The conflict in the country creates room for economic exploitation by external players, who take advantage of this situation to loot natural resources belonging to the Congolese. The Democratic Republic of Congo is also said to be resource-cursed because its natural bounty has brought about a negative external interest in the region. The ongoing conflict in this region stems from long-term issues, but the bottom line is the result of the death of millions and civilian suffering, while their resources are being extracted by the elite on each side. The idea of instability in exchange for economic gain cannot continue forever, as this is putting a dent in humanity. 3. Terror and banditry in Nigeria. Nigeria is densely populated and is in West Africa, which is at the Gulf of Guinea. The second half of 2022 has seen intensified insecurity in the country. Nigeria has seen different forms of conflict in recent times, including the terrorist attacks in the northern part of the country by Islamic insurgents. The southern part has also been hit by a secessionist movement from the indigenous people of Biafra. Banditry and communal clashes have constituted most of the violence reported in the first half of 2022. The past few years have seen Boko Haram terrorists cause havoc in the northern part of the country. We have seen attacks on places of worship, schools, and government infrastructures in the region. Many people are forcefully displaced from their homes because of this conflict. The federal government has blamed these terrorist groups for the deadly attack in Ondo State on Sunday, June 5, 2022, that resulted in 40 casualties in a church. Government efforts to curb some of these militiamen have been unsuccessful. The southeast of the country has also been hit by violence from unidentified armed men, who are believed to be members of the indigenous people of Biafra. These attacks have increased with the growing secession movement in that region, an act that the indigenous people of Biafra have denied and has called on its people to unite and fight against Fulani herdsmen and bandits. Agricultural activities in the north have largely been hindered due to clashes between armed herdsmen and farmers over the destruction of farmland by cows. These conflicts have led to a rise in food prices. The impact of this act of terror is felt more in developing countries like Nigeria, which have a low-income economy. 2. The Cameroon Civil War, or the Anglophone Crisis. The conflict in Cameroon started in 2017, and today the conflict is between the Cameroon military and secessionists in the English-speaking part of the country. These separatist groups have complained about the marginalization and discrimination of their people, who accounted for about 20% of the total population. The language barrier is said to be the major driving force of this conflict. Cameroon is said to be a bilingual state, but French is the only language used to access public amenities in Douala and Yaoundé, which are francophone regions. In 2016, peaceful protests by Anglophone civil servants against the marginalization of these two English-speaking regions, which are the Northwest and Southwest, met with brute force by government forces. This saw the death of unarmed protesters who were shot and killed. This act by the Cameroon military further escalated the tensions between both sides. Ambazonian separatists and government forces have carried out mass killings and human rights abuses in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Human Rights Watch estimated the death of about 4,000 civilians, including women and children, since the conflict started in 2016. The United Nations has also projected that about 70,000 students were out of school in 2021, displacing about 76,000 people, with about 80,000 of them living in Nigeria as refugees because of this conflict. However, our sources on the ground believe that these numbers are more than what is being reported. The US government made several arrests in December 2022 related to this conflict. They arrested several Cameroonians in the USA who were fueling this conflict. The Boko Haram attacks have also been heard in the far north of the country, taking many lives. The ongoing crises are having a harsh human, economic, and social impact on the lives of the people. The civil war in Cameroon has an international dimension, considering how they were colonized and decolonized by their former rulers. We have seen reluctance from Germany, France, and Britain to find a long-lasting solution to this conflict. The Cameroon Civil War doesn't get enough media coverage, unlike every other conflict in Africa, which makes it a ground for mass atrocities. 1. The conflict in Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a population of over 100 million people. The country has been in active conflict since 2017. The Ethiopian army and Tigrayan forces have been at war. Tigray, which is one of the regions in Ethiopia, went ahead and carried out an election in 2020 in opposition to the government's request to cancel the 2020 election due to COVID-19 concerns. The government saw this as a secessionist move and declared a state of emergency in that region. Tigrayan forces were declared terrorists by the government in May of 2021, and these have seen a large-scale military offensive on this region. The conflict has seen forcible displacement, massacres, and attacks on government infrastructure like schools and hospitals. Sexual violence has also been reported in this region by the government and Tigrayan forces, especially in the Amhara region of Tigray. The Ethiopian government has accused Tigray People's Liberation Front of causing ethnic clashes across the country. Eritrea has also been involved in this war in a view to protecting its border from Tigrayan aggression. Their involvement has received international condemnation. The United Nations Secretary General has also called for the immediate withdrawal of Eritrean troops. In August of 2022, the World Food Programme estimated that about 14 to 15 million people in Ethiopia need food. The Washington Post has even described the conflict in Ethiopia as the world's deadliest war. On March 2022, the federal government declared a ceasefire to allow for humanitarian aid for Tigray. Ethiopia's government took steps toward peace on 14 June 2022. The government had to set up a committee to negotiate with Tigrayan forces. However, these negotiations were short-lived because of renewed fighting in the town of Kobo between the two forces. On 20 September 2022, Tigray forces saw a full-scale military offensive from neighboring Eritrea. 50 civilians, including women and children, were killed when a strike hit a school on 5 October 2022. However, the month of November saw positive signs as peace talks began. The government and Tigray forces signed an agreement to end hostilities under the watch of the African Union. We hope that the peace is maintained in Tigray. Africa is facing many crises that are hindering developmental efforts. Conflicts of this nature have a long-term negative impact on economic growth. The losses caused by the crisis are seen in financial and structural losses that have a negative influence on tax revenue. There is also a spillover effect due to the ability of this conflict to hinder international economic activities. Also, these conflicts make it difficult for the leaders to make an impact on the country as all the government's funds are directed to the defense ministries. To end this conflict, Africa must look for the root cause of this conflict rather than seeking to simply end the conflict. One of the causes of these ongoing conflicts is bad governance, which fails to promote growth and development. For a country's peace and stability to be assured, relative conditions need to be stable to maintain these goals. Inclusiveness, strong institutions, the rule of law, and good governance are very necessary to maintain peace and order. Also, the average African needs to understand that war has never solved any problem. Africans must not let external forces talk them into killing each other. We must love each other. The time is now for Africa to be at peace, and 2023 is the year of peace in Africa. If you are interested in knowing more about Africa, then subscribe to The New Tourist to join our community. Also, turn on the notifications to get alerts whenever we drop a new educational video like this one. Let us know what you think of the ongoing conflicts in Africa. Thank you for watching, and see you in our next video.